I think I might be developing dementia because I thought the first episode of Rick and Morty came out on the 28th of May, when in reality it came out on the 25th. Excelsior, Rickheads! Yes, I know. By the time you're watching this, the next episode of Season 8 of Rick and Morty has already come out, and I'll be talking about it on Wednesday as opposed to Sunday. So I don't want to see a single goddamn comment saying, "Oh, you took a whole week to talk about this." Shut your ass. But here we are, starting off Season 8 of Rick and Morty with the Matrix episode that I was so very hyped for. It's about goddamn time this show pulled a Matrix. And this first episode starts off by showing us that Summer and Morty are in fact the victims of the Matrix. Summer is this giant tech CEO who's super wealthy, intelligent, and basically runs the world, and Morty is a societal reject living out in the woods. But something's off about this Matrix. Everybody seems to have an obsession with telling everybody how bad it is to use someone else's phone charger even when you think they aren't using it. I don't know about you, but I'm smelling a Rick. To escape the Matrix, or overload it more rather, Summer sends this thing into the sky that allows all cell phones to be charged wirelessly from the sky? And by making phone chargers obsolete, they beat the Matrix and get ejected from it. And apparently, Rick decided to put his grandkids in the Matrix to teach them a lesson about taking his phone charger, but Rick kind of fell asleep at the controls, and Summer and Morty were in there for the equivalent of 17 years.
This is why I have bedtime wine.
Credits, please! And after they get ejected, Beth, of course, respects their kids' decisions to retain their memories, and Rick is like, yeah, sure, no problem. He respectfully respects her agreeing with their decision, but he tells Beth to give him a holler when things go south. And oh boy, do they go south pretty quick. Summer tries to go annihilate high school with her gigabrain, but, you know, high school's still high school, and she gets humiliated in the first 30 seconds after walking into the building. Since Summer is mentally like the same age as Beth now, Beth starts treating her daughter like an equal woman and, well, not like her daughter. Since the two can relate so much now since Summer's lived a whole life at this point, Summer starts calling her mother Beth. Yeah, that's not a good sign of a parental relationship.
Do you just buy your shirts from Target, or do you also work there?
Okay, Summer, for fuck's sake. I get that you're an adult now, like mentally, but she's your mother. Respect her. Meanwhile, with the big R&M, Morty is getting handsy with Rick's death race car. That is a sentence that I wrote. But Morty seems to know exactly what he's doing and has some pretty good suggestions, so Rick is like, hey, alright, that's pretty cool. He's all about this new Morty. Rick is even so kind as to toss Morty a beer. But when Morty fails to grab it because he forgot that he's short again, the shattering of the beer going all over the place kinda made Morty have a flashback from his Matrix life. Unlike Summer, who kept steadfast in knowing that this was all a Matrix and none of it was real and that it was all fake, Morty kind of got like sucked into it, if you will. He got matrixed. He got arrested, he got good with his hands in prison, he got a tattoo and joined some kind of phone charger gang or something. Then he finally earned parole, struggled to find a job, became a firefighter, became a soldier. Bro went through it. Bro really went through it in there. And I gotta say, that tattoo that he got, it's a bit odd. It is a bit odd. I've always personally found tattoos with heavy emphasis on like lips and tongues to be very strange. But just keep that tattoo in the back of your head for now. Even though Morty is going through it right now, Rick is being super supportive and is really open to Morty's ideas, like adding a snorkel to the death race car. Seems like it'd be a little bit pointless because it's a car, but hey, Rick is deciding to do a Morty idea, so who cares? While all of this is happening, Summer's kind of starting to turn shitheel and starts using philosophy about the regrets of life to try and manipulate her mother into buying her a $3,000 suit. She really was a CEO, wasn't she? But on the flip side, Rick and Morty are having a great time at a non-named brand warehouse, and they even get some sweet deals on some rebar.
They got a sale on rebar! Oh, hell yeah! Buy 2 rebar, get 1 free bar?
I'm really liking the contrast between how Rick and Beth are dealing with Morty and Summer's changes, respectively. On Beth's side, things seemed really good initially. It seemed like, hey, maybe I can like just hang out with my daughter now that she's a proper lady. But it becomes very clear very quickly that Summer's overconfidence has developed into severe arrogance. And she also seems to now have the tendency to emotionally blackmail people to get what she wants. And then on the Rick side of things, Rick and Morty are just having a good time and sharing their love of craftsmanship with one another. Beth and Summer come back, and Rick lets Beth use his phone charger, which, kind of forgot about the PTSD and the fun of the moment, didn't you, Rick? We get another flashback of Morty's Matrix life, and since he was one of the only 2 real people in there, he couldn't actually die. Typically, it's you die in the Matrix, you die in real life, but I imagine the last thing Rick wants to do is kill his grandkids with a Matrix centered around teaching them a lesson about not taking his phone charger. Wow, that was a sentence, huh? Beth gets fed up with Matrix Summer and tries to mind blow her, but she doesn't do it right, and Summer hotwires a car and drives off screaming all sorts of self-preachy middle-aged philosophy. Also the classic Morty, on the other hand, pulls a sneaky with an invention he came up with while he was in the Matrix, something called a regrotch.
Charger spelled backwards. Cute.
Turns out both Morty and Summer had plans to hijack vehicles via pure coincidence. Morty goes a step further, however, and puts Rick in the Matrix, and it's a Matrix about not putting people into matrices.
Ah! Seriously, Morty? You're that uncreative?
But this is Rick we're talking about. You know he's not gonna stay in there for very long. And while Rick is in the Matrix, Morty is taking his unstoppable death race tank to the center of Power Plant Valley, the center of all American power grids, and it's a forest full of those fake trees you see everywhere. You know the ones I'm talking about. And while that's all happening, Beth and Summer finally reconcile in a pottery studio run by middle-aged women for middle-aged women. Although it turns out the middle-aged women actually end up being vampires. Beth advises Summer on how she shouldn't have to be a middle-aged woman yet, and that the best part about being 17 is not knowing how hard it's going to be. Summer says that she doesn't know how to be Beth's friend, and Beth is like, "You don't have to be my friend, you're my daughter." And that was really sweet. I liked that. That was a good moment. And right as they're sitting there just making up and just reconciling, mere seconds afterward, because of the beauty of the internet, they find out what Morty's up to. Does Summer even know how to deal with this sort of thing?
You know how? I'm a tech CEO, so even if I don't, I'll pretend I do.
All right, fair enough. And Rick became the architect, the oracle, and the one, all at the same time. I gotta say this for the record, but I am a huge arachnophobe, like the biggest one you will ever meet. But I fucking love these little spider worker drones in Rick's Matrix. I love these guys. I would love to have a small army of them. Damn, I gotta say, this season and episode so far, it's got its transitions on point. We get another flashback of Morty's Matrix wartime. That kind of sounds like a concept for like an interdimensional cable episode or something.
And now it is time for another edition of Morty's Matrix Wartime. New episode premieres at 5 on Station 3.
And apparently during his time in the war, Morty killed Osama bin Charjan. Yeah, I got nothing.
Oh shit, it's got a snorkel!
So that's why Morty wanted the snorkel installed in the death race tank. Huh. I guess it wasn't pointless. Just as Morty is about to breach the nuclear reactor, Summer stops him and reveals her darkest secret. Morty's involvement in the war, his entire tragic, horrible experience, was all orchestrated by Summer. She needed all the lithium she could get her hands on in order to make the wireless charging thing for the phones work. That way the Matrix would be obsolete. That way they could go home. And Morty was the perfect weapon and asset to do exactly that. And when Morty fires back, pointing out how Rick would have eventually woken up to let them out, Summer retorts with the fact that they left and escaped the Matrix on their own terms. Not Rick's terms, their terms. And if they didn't do that, Rick would have just mind blown them right out the gate, and that would have been that. They wouldn't be having this talk right now, and they wouldn't be going through all this growth and whatnot together. It would have just been boop, gone. Even though this whole Matrix incident was brought about by Rick just falling asleep at the controls like he does because he's a fucking alcoholic, it really brought out some of the best qualities of Morty and Summer. It brought out the intelligence that Summer inherited from Rick, and it brought out Morty's unbreaking, unwavering, iron will. Even if these aren't the best versions of Morty and Summer, it does give us a glimpse in what the best versions of them could look like.
This is exactly why you shouldn't steal your grandpa's inventions!
What?
No fucking way.
You're not in the Matrix!
Oh, thank God. I was not prepared to unpack a Matrix Inception fusion episode. Morty's rampage almost caused a Chernobyl after all. Would you look at that? Morty and Summer decide to revert back to their normal selves. But before doing so, Morty gets that weird gang charger tattoo with the weird lips. So actual, normal, canon Morty C-137, gets his first tattoo in this episode. he's growing up. And they're immediately freaking out. That seems to be a common trend with the Mind Blower. Whenever like something really bad goes awry, everybody just freaks out as soon as just zap, freak out. Matrix Summer tried to reach out to normal Summer, but it doesn't work. Roll credits, episode over. Now that we're at the end, I want to talk about this episode's theme. That, of course, being control. I mean, you can't do anything Matrix related without the primary theme being control. Rick tried to control his grandkids from using his phone charger without permission by putting them into a fucking matrix designed to drill it into their heads not to do that. When Rick fell asleep at the controls, Summer took control of their bleak situation to try and find a way out of the matrix. Even though Morty thought he was taking control of his life after getting parole, it was actually Summer controlling his each and every action in the lead up and follow up to the war. In Morty's case, he was being taken control of twice. But when he escaped, he had a plan ready to Uno reverse Rick, but, you know, obviously it wasn't a good enough plan because it's Rick. And due to all he's been through inside the Matrix, Morty lost control of his emotions and became very impulsive after the main details of his plan were complete. I really like the contrast between Morty and Summer in this episode. On one hand, Summer is trying to take control of her future, whereas on the other hand, Morty has lost all control over his future and who he is fundamentally as a person. But with Summer's confession and all the emotional support she could possibly muster, Morty regains control of his emotions and make a choice that he had control over, until he thought he was being bamboozled again. Thank God he wasn't. But it all loops back around to Rick when he assures them that they aren't in a matrix anymore. Rick's arc back in season 7 was dealing with and letting go of the past. Dealing with it in the form of Rick Prime and letting go of it when Morty told him that he saw Diane in the fear hole and Rick chose not to go in the fear hole. When Rick put up Morty's picture next to the fear hole instead of going into it in pursuit of Diane, that indicated to me immediately that Rick's next major arc in the next season would be about doing the best with what he has and doing the best he can with it, i.e. his relationships with his family, especially Morty. Now, obviously, Rick's off to a pretty rough start with that, considering the whole, oops, left you in a matrix while I fell asleep and you were in there for the equivalent of 17 years, my bad. But at the very end, Rick respects the decisions of both Matrix Morty and Matrix Summer. They want to be reverted back, but they want to leave fragments of themselves for their normal selves in the form of the tattoo and the recordings from Summer. I think when Rick took 20% of that fuel rod as a tip and said, I think that could be a metaphor displaying the bare minimum Rick is willing to accept when trying to right his wrongs. 20% isn't terrible, but it could be better. The reason I speculate that this just random gag that could be a total throwaway thing is some vague metaphor is because it happens right after everything else concludes. Like literal seconds after everything else. But to sum up my thoughts on this first episode of season 8 of Rick and Morty, I really enjoyed it. Obvious reasons include, you know, it was a Matrix style episode and I'm a sucker for Matrix anything, but I also really liked the emphasis on Morty and Summer, and I really liked how Rick and Beth were treated, narratively anyway, treated as forces in their lives as opposed to full characters. The humor was good, there were some pretty well implemented subtleties, the voice acting didn't disappoint, and I managed to tell a pretty good story about control in just 20 minutes. Something I also noticed now having watched the full first episode is they use a lot of clips from the first episode in the teaser trailer, and they did it in such a way where I thought like 3 different clips from episode 1 were all from different episodes, so bonus points to the trailer, I guess. I mean, it makes sense. You don't want to flash all the goods right away. But what do you think? Am I overanalyzing everything way too much, or did you get as much out of this episode as I did? I don't know, but please feel free to let me know down in the comments. Also, while you're down there, I'd greatly appreciate it if you drop a like and sub. I'm going to be making a whole slew of videos on every episode of Season 8 of Rick and Morty, and I'm probably going to do a ranking of them at the very end. Who knows, maybe I'll do some other small video essays about it, or a retrospective, or something. I don't know, just tell me what you want to see, for God's sake. I'm not your mom. And if you really like the way I do things and you want to show me a little bit of extra support, then definitely consider becoming a channel member. Not only do you get access to a whole bunch of exclusive rewards, but you also directly support me in the process. Also, once we hit 10 consecutive channel members, 10 members, I will start doing weekly, you heard me, weekly members only live streams where you, the members, get to decide what I suffer through. But that is gonna do it for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, everyone.